Thank you, everyone. Thank you, King. Thank you, Don. Thank you to the members of ANAVETS 280 and the Chinese Canadian Museum Society, Military Museum Society. It is my honor and privilege to be presenting my story, how I uncovered my uncle's secret life as a member of Force 136. First, I am a professional genealogist now. I am on the Ancestry Canada Advisory Board. I'm a member of the Association of Professional Genealogists. I'm pursuing international accreditation as a genealogist, and I might actually be the first one to achieve this in Western Canada with this body. I'm a member of a whole bunch of societies, history groups, and as we were discussing just before I began, I am also working with Catherine Clement on the paper trail to the 1923 Chinese Exclusion Act as a member of one of her research team members. My blog is past-presence.com. It's been going, it's in its 6th year, and I talk about records and resources, analysis techniques, et cetera, all things genealogy, but with a focus on Chinese Canadian genealogy, because it's a really underrepresented subject in the field of general genealogy. And I'm here to really talk about my story, the James Bonds of Chinatown, where I uncovered my uncle's secret history as a super spy. And this blog has been one of my best read stories, literally introducing the idea of Force 136 to generations of people with tens of thousands of readers. I also wrote a book, Getting Started in Chinese Genealogy, because I don't speak Chinese and yet I'm a genealogist. And so I share my tips and tricks and techniques, but just so you know. Okay, let's get started. First of all, here's my family. This portrait I only uncovered after some research. And in the center is Chu Wai-ming, my grandmother, Yip Kiu-shek, my grandfather. On the right is Private Wing C. Cecil Yip, my father. And on the left, Lieutenant Corporal Dake, known as Dick Wing Yip, my uncle. Now, when I think about Remembrance Day, this is what I know. My dad would march in the Remembrance Day parade. This is him marching just in front of the Wing Sang building on Pender Street. This is him right here. And many years later, I uncovered this photo of my father's World War II time, but Dad didn't talk about it. He didn't have the story. And what I knew is that Dad was a member of this Legion, Pacific Unit 280, and very frequently his buddies would come and pick him up. And I have to tell you, my mother wasn't completely down with this. But I know that my father loved the Legion, and that also my Uncle Dick was a member. When I used to ask him about World War II and what his time was like in the war, or anything in the past, really, he had no words. He used to say, that was a long time ago, and you weren't there. You don't know. And that's true. I wasn't there. I didn't know. But here's the thing. I'm a storyteller and a researcher. And so that's what I'll be presenting to you. Now, I'll start off with a quote. Don Rumsfeld had this famous quote where he talks about 3 areas of knowledge: things that you know, the known knowns, things that you don't know, known unknowns, and things that you don't know that you don't know. And I would have to say that this entire story is unknown unknowns. I knew nothing about Dick's story before I started. I had no family stories shared by anyone, no films. I didn't know documentaries. I had no books. no documents, no photos, and I do not have military experience. And so everything was from ground zero. So it took me 10 years to write this story, but I have to tell you that just because you write a story doesn't mean that the research stops. So this, what I'm presenting to you today, is really the culmination of 15 years of work, because it keeps going. 15 years. For example, I was able to get my Uncle Dick's World War II file from Library and Archives Canada. It only took 4 years, and it confirms that length of service, Canada departed, attested 5th October until 25th February 1925, was abroad 25th February 1945 to 8th of December 1945, and then returned to Canada 9th of December. So that was really helpful for dates, but let me tell you, I only got this a couple of months ago. This would have been super helpful had I been able to get it in the beginning, but Veterans Affairs moves as slowly as it does. In the same file, I learned that my uncle was qualified to wear the crossed rifles as of 24th January 1945. What it says is that he completed 8 weeks of basic training and a week of advanced training as a gunner. He was selected as a special volunteer Chinese and was being dispatched for service to the Far East. Then there's a whole bunch of abbreviations, SOS, A3, CAT, I don't know what those mean, to number 3 District Depot, Ottawa, effective 16th February. And it signed the Army Examiner at Shiloh. Now, that's another clue. With all of this information, therefore, I was able to put together this timeline. On the 8th of October, my Uncle Dick signed his attestation papers. He was at Shiloh, Manitoba to train from January to February 1945. He was in England from March to May 1945, and then he was deployed to India, May to September 1945. Now, as you know, the Eastern Theater quickly ended with the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and he was then sent back from India through England to Aldershot and eventually discharged in May 1946. He was awarded several awards, the Canadian Volunteer Service Medal and Clasp in 1949, and the War Medal of 1949 of 39 to 45, and eventually the Burma Star for service in India in 1950. However, I discovered his story in 2008 by reading Paul Yee's Saltwater City. You can imagine what a surprise it was to be reading this book and to instantly recognize my uncle. And suddenly I had a cold wash of shame because I didn't know my uncle's story. And how was it possible that it's in a book and he didn't tell me? So to show you this photo again, this is my Uncle Dick, Bud Pwan, Hubie Lee, Gordon Wong, Larry Goon, Herbert Lim, and Willie Chong. Eventually, I would come to research every one of these people because that's what you do in genealogy. If you can't get at it straight on, you end up researching everybody around them. But this photo and this book started my entire journey because I thought, how can I possibly be even a member of my family and not know this important story that was so integral to my uncle? I mean, so here's a list of the sources that I consulted. I don't want to make this overly heavy in a research sense, but let me just say I have looked at archives in Canada, England, United States. I've looked at books in used bookstores every single summer for a decade. I've had emails, interviews, I've been to legions, I've been to museums, newspapers, obituaries, online sources, photos, private papers, videos, and websites. The story of Force 136 In other words, it's not an easy story to uncover. Now, this is changing, and I'll get to that in this presentation. But when I started, it was, if you didn't know, you didn't know. Oh. All right. Eventually, I came up with a list of keywords, of terms that I was just learning. Force 136 in India, places like Pune, Aldershot, Bramshot. I know these words are familiar to you, so I don't have to explain them, but they were new to me. Military abbreviations such as SEAC and SOE, and names, everyone's names and all their variations. The friends, the descendants, the associates, the neighbors. I learned the term Operation Oblivion and the first 13. I joined social media groups, especially SOE and Resistance, who have been incredible with helping my learning curve into not only military, but historic military. And I learned about the Special Operations Executive, even the weather in Pune. So that came down to, this is just a short list of the people that have been integral to my learning about the story. Willie Chong had a website. It was amazing. It wasn't running yesterday when I checked it. Catherine Clement, you know, and she is now a good friend as well as just a compatriot, a fellow historian and researcher. Alex Louie, who was interviewed by his daughter, Jerry Osborne, in the amazing Unwanted Soldiers documentary. The reason why I bring this up is because while my dad couldn't explain it, Alex could. Both sons of storied, historic Chinese Canadian families, but you know what? You can't eat your descendancy. And I felt that Alex was a really good proxy in describing what it was like for Chinese Canadians growing up in Chinatown in the 1920s. My dad was born in 1922. Captain Colin Stevens, he has a military museum in Surrey. Colonel Chris Weicker, who wrote and shared with me his incredible paper, Secret Warriors in the Pacific War. This is the paper I wanted to write. And so, Chris, thank you again. Larry Wong of the museum, who was kind enough to correspond with me. Marjorie Wong, who wrote her amazing book, of which it only took me 8 years to get a copy because the book is out of print. And then Descendants of Force 136. I would like to stress that neither my father nor my uncle shared their story with me. And so it's pretty hard to research around people. Now, here are some of the questions. I will not read this out, but it's to give you an idea of everything I got curious about. Who knew about it? Where are the documents? What is a K number? Because I didn't know that either. I analyzed photos. I looked at divisional patches. I asked, what role did the Chinese Canadians play, like in a granular detail? I know what contribution Chinese Canadians played in the grand sense of our human rights, our civil rights. I've got that. But the granular part, still really curious. How were they trained? How did they travel? What were the names of the ships, et cetera, et cetera. And then photos. Every photo I got, I analyzed to death. Eventually, since I live in Saskatoon, I managed to make it to the military museum where I saw the excellent presentations and the cards. Of course, I'd hit the museum cards before then, but just unfortunately, Larry himself was not able to meet me, so I was there alone, but it was still an incredible visit, and I took lots and lots of photos. I also visited the plaque across the street with the previously identified members of my family that Larry had said, here are a number of yips that could possibly be your family. Now, they're not all my family, but Cecil Wing Yip, Dick Wing Yip, Fred are definitely family. So in 2018, Dick's widow, Yvette, my aunt, gifted to me 2 photo albums that were her husband's. And I scanned and analyzed 979 images to bring this story together. And by that, I finally had the granular detail. Remember, I didn't have his World War II file at the time to say where he was, what he had done, where he had been. So I put this together for you. it is amazing to me when we think about the history, the kinds of places that a person can go. He was born in Vancouver. He trained at Shiloh. He probably departed from Canada to England via Halifax. He originally landed at Bramshot to muster. He was there for some 8 weeks. And then Alex Louis said they went through the Suez Canal to eventually get to India. So that's here and through to Pune, where he eventually joined the 100 plus other members of Force 136. Along the way, my uncle had a camera, and this is pretty rare because film and photography was expensive. And so he was privileged to have a camera and to take pictures. I don't know where this ship is going. It is not annotated, but it is a rare photo of a military man on his way, or maybe home or to the war. Similarly, these 3 photos are Dick, and I don't know the 2 gentlemen here, and it's somewhere in between Shiloh, Manitoba, and Halifax. And I deduced that because at Shiloh, they were getting on the train, and so they probably didn't have time to hang around on the platform smoking. And at Halifax, they would have debarked. So it's somewhere between. And it's winter, obviously, because there's snow on the ground. Major Elliott wrote Scarlet to Green, and in the appendices, he said that Force 136 was dispatched in small drafts, February through April, June, July 1945. I think that's what happened with my uncle. He definitely went in the first cohort, February to April, and this ship is representative of the kind of ship that he would have seen. I don't know if it's the ship that brought him to India or if it's the ship that's taking him away from India, but it's still pretty rare to see a troop transport in 1945. Oh. Finally, this famous photo of Dick and his buddies. This is at Kalyan train station. Kalyan is just up from Mumbai. On the back of this photo, Dick annotated it, Kalyan Station, India, 1945. Kalyan is just south of Pune. So let's start with Shiloh. Shiloh, Manitoba. Canadian Forces Base is right on the western edge of the Spruce Woods Provincial Forest. It's great because there's not a lot of people around if you're taking military training. And the fabulous thing about this is that Dick took pictures of his time at Shiloh. So I don't know if this is him or not, but it's clearly him, showing him taking machine gun target practice, standing at Shiloh camp. Because these sorts of pictures, this sort of like, look what we're doing, this is fairly rare in my experience of seeing military photos. Here's Dick in the middle. And this photo. Now, I don't know the date of this, but my guess, Dick is here, is that this is at the completion of their training at Shiloh. Everyone's got rifles. We know from the World War II file that he was awarded the Cross Rifles after 8 weeks of training. And so I believe this date is February 1945. So then they went to England, Aldershot, Bramshot, Glasgow, and London. Going through his papers and his photos, there's this photo of him at Trafalgar Square. Now, I know it's Trafalgar because they took other pictures. And this one. So this one was originally black and white, and it was such a good picture of all of them that a historic artist, Val Erde, took the photo, enlarged it, and colored it. Now, she's a historical artist. That means that the colors are not, the colors are as true to life as history and research can make them. everything down to the Canadian patches on the arm, the brass buttons. And she said this particular picture hit her in the heart because she's from this area in London. Eventually, we used this image and I had it blown up and I gifted it to Dick's widow, Yvette. Dick, Willie, Herbie, Leonard, and Bud. On the back of this photo, it said, here's the actual image. It said, on the move again, just before we left London, corner of Wimpole and Cavendish Street in Maryborough, that's slightly spelled wrong, near Regent Park City Centre. And it's stamped with a unit sensor. Third location was Pune, the Eastern Warfare School #1, where, like all Force 136 members, they had to keep up their swim training. This is Dick on the far right. Here's that original photo I had on the title, the uniforms and the training camp. And this photo. I love this photo because, first of all, no one's ever seen this photo outside of you and me. And Dick thought so much of his people that he named everyone. Jimmy, Singh, Gordon, sorry, I should read out the entire names. Jimmy Lee, Singh, E.O., Gordon Quant, Roy Leong, Bob Yeasting, George Wong. Anyway, if everyone would like a copy of this, please just connect with me afterwards. It would be my pleasure to share this with you. It's a very high-res version, so you'll be able to read all the names and blow it right up to see all the faces. Just doing this work alone can take a couple of hours. On the back of this photo, it said, September 1945, EWS 1, Pune, Eastern Warfare School, so I researched that too. And then I had a good sense that Dick learned jungle warfare, silent killing, wireless work, and everything that was mentioned in the excellent documentaries Force 136 and Unknown Soldiers. He was, in my eyes, a real hero, unknown, unsung. And then there's this. I was shocked to find that Dick had actually made the Canadian Army newsreel. Let me play that for you.
#1 read
This is him.
A group of Chinese Canadians
Here.
just in from the Far East. Specially trained for secret work behind Jap lines, they are interviewed by the Canadian Army newsreel. How do you kind of like this going on? Well, we don't. It's kind of cool here. You can have someone else.
That's Dick on the far right.
Right. Well, just what were you fellows doing down in India?
We're all trained for duty behind the Jap line. Like these boys are all in wireless and signal work, except Papa Lee here, who's trained in demolition work. Yes, 12 of us were trained around Pune there for demolition work. They were going in for parachuting, but unfortunately, VJK came along.
Now, was this exactly what this flag stands for?
Well, I have to see it flash. It's out the Eagle Command. I will know that. What you followed were intending to contact the Chinese behind the Jap lines. At least you all speak Chinese.
Well, definitely.
No, the veterans are right. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. In fact, before she passed away, Yvette gave me the last of Dick's memorabilia, and I have the SEAC patch, the Rising Phoenix. Now, eventually I was going to put this all together, go to England, look at primary sources. I had a page count from the National Archives at Kew, because the main special operations executive documents are not in Canada, even though they were Canadian Army, because they were British. They're at the archives in Kew. And I asked them if they could send me copies of all the different files that I had identified about Chinese Canadian soldiers. And they said, yes, it'll only be 244 pounds. And I thought, oh my goodness, okay, for that much money, I can just go to London and enjoy myself and go to the archives. But unbeknownst to me, Colonel Weicker was doing his history degree and produced Secret Warriors in the Pacific. It is, in my estimation, well, I mean, it is an amazing work. Thank you for that. And thank you for sharing it with me. And it's the paper I hope to write myself. All of this is to say, this work, it takes obsession, dedication, and skills. And I encourage every one of you, please, what can you do for history? Please tell your story to somebody. Don't make them go through what I went through, because your story is important and it needs to be heard. And it has been my honor to speak with you, and I will now stop sharing and take any questions.